a way that doesn't lead to further problems would be the Supreme Court to take all of these cases and simply say, we're not going to use our courts to go after politicians. We're not a banana republic. We're not going to act like it. And all of these are wash. I don't know legally whether they can take them all up, but I would assume they're going to try to get to the Supreme Court. If they all do and the Supreme Court does that, they could essentially wash the slate on this. But if he's forced out of business or forced into bankruptcy because of this, $300 billion is not chump change. He's got to come up with all of the interest. It adds up to $400 or $500 million by the time you get the interest going, and it's just patently unfair. So, but I think it's also getting the public more to his side. I mean, nobody could touch him in the primary after he was indicted. Now he looks like he's running ahead in battleground states, despite not always, saying the appropriate thing or even the best thing. He's now running ahead in battleground states because people think he's being treated unfairly.
I think it's oddly comparable to the point you made about vaccine uptakes in medicines that are not related to the pandemic, i.e. ordinary childhood vaccines. The trust in the establishment and its institutions is so low that a figure that epitomizes anti-establishment sentiment, and perhaps even more deeply the emotions that undergird that, will increase in popularity the more he is attacked by the establishment, given that it's unlikely that the Democrat Party have any other weapon to deploy other than this judicial artillery, because to address the problems, if you want to regard it from this perspective, that led to the rise of Trump, i.e. inequality, corruption, the donor class, corporatization of America, the globalization of US politics, the necessity for forever wars, because these issues cannot be touched and cannot be dealt with, this ongoing judicial process, I suppose, is the only option. Given that I imagine, Senator, that you're a man who has some contretemps and distinctions even within your own party, do you see the rise of figures like Donald Trump and perhaps yet more specifically Robert Kennedy as an appetite for more independent political movements? And do you see that there could be a future in which America was not the bipartisan, or as some would say, uniparty institution that it currently is?
You're seeing the term more and more on the internet, but you're also seeing it used by many of us who are rebelling against the leadership of the Senate, calling it the uniparty. I can remember even back to when I was a kid, I would come up here as a child, as an intern, and work in my dad's office, and he always commented that the top of the committee, Republican or Democrat, were the same. There was only differences as you worked your way down the committee to newer members. As they rose up the ranks, they became the same, and there really was not a dime's worth of difference between both parties. It's still to a large degree that way, particularly on foreign policy, on believing this old Cold War mentality that we have to, Ukraine. If Ukraine falls, Poland falls, and the dominoes will fall, and Russia will be in England, and Russia will be on our shores, and nonsense, because Russia can't even take over Ukraine. They don't seem to have the ability to even conquer a smaller country next to them. But the thing is that mentality is in both parties. They're the ones who want to send unlimited money to Ukraine. They're the Republicans who say, well, we're fiscally conservative, except for when it comes to military might and military intervention around the world, which means they're not really fiscally conservative. And I tried that line when I ran for president in 2016. I said, look, none of these guys are fiscally conservative. You can't be fiscally conservative unless you're willing to save money both on the welfare front and the warfare front. It doesn't mean we eliminate either one of them, but you got to save money on both fronts. Instead, we do the opposite, and the compromise, there's always a compromise. There'll be a compromise this week, today, and next week. We'll spend more money on warfare and welfare, and then we'll send some to Ukraine, some to Taiwan. It'll all go out the door, but it'll all be borrowed. It will be another $1.5 trillion in debt, further in debt in 1 year.
In your excellent book, Deception, you quote the poet Parveen Shakir, who uses the image of fireflies being caught in daylight as the way in which what is currently called the censorship industrial complex are able to manage information, to conceal truths, to manage wars in the manner that you've just described as necessary, fundamental, using inaccurate anachronistic historical analogy in order to reframe conflicts that bear no real comparison to the conflicts of the last century. This incredible ability that the establishment, for want of a better term, has to control our spaces of reality surely needs to be interrupted. Do you believe that we have a significant problem when it comes to censorship right now, in particular during the pandemic? It was acknowledged that true information was censored, legitimate science was controlled. Is the Barrington Declaration, is that the right way? Is that the thing that Jay Bhattacharya did? I wonder what you consider to be the power of the state to use proxies to crush dissenting voices. What a problem that is. I've certainly experienced it myself, as a matter of fact, and I wonder what your view of that matter is.
I do worry about the government's involvement with big tech and with social media platforms. Throughout all of this, we've discovered that the FBI and Homeland Security are meeting weekly with all of the major tech platforms and coercing and pushing and cajoling them to take down information. That, I think, goes against our First Amendment, and I have a bill to make that illegal. I would prevent any government employee from meeting with anybody from the media to discuss removing constitutionally protected speech.
Yeah.
The reason we write it that way is there are some speech they claim would be in danger or insightful. They'll still be allowed to talk about that. There are things that are criminal. They should be allowed to talk to media about things that are criminal on their platforms. But whether or not you think a mask works is an opinion, and it can be based on science, but it has something the government should have no viewpoint in that and should have no power in suppressing it. So I have a bill to do that, but I can't get a Democrat on board. I've tried talking to the couple of Democrats who I think are reasonable, and one of them said this to me. He said, well, we have to be able to police disinformation, and what if the Republicans tell everybody that the election's on Wednesday instead of on Tuesday? And I kind of thought this to myself. I didn't tell him. I said, well, gosh, if people are that stupid, maybe they shouldn't vote. But I didn't say that. But that's what their worry is. They think the government, that people are too stupid and that they would actually not vote, or, text in the name of your candidate and that'll be your vote. Nobody believes that.